Hi my love, welcome to the live. Now today we've got a bit of a triggering topic, so I just want you to be aware of that and maybe come back to the video at a better time if you're not really in a space where you can let out any emotions or need a bit of privacy. So today is all about what does sexual trauma really mean, and I just want to disclose, I suppose, that it's kind of hard to define this because it's completely different for everyone. Everyone has a different experience. So the purpose of this video is to broaden our understanding of what sexual trauma could include, and just highlight some areas that might be symptoms to maybe notice about yourself. And then over the next few weeks, I'll be diving deep into how sexual trauma manifests in the physical body, on a mental level, and in a spiritual level, and going through or some ideas on how to heal those different levels of where the trauma is stored. So first of all, what does sexual trauma mean? So it's a bit of a bad definition, technically speaking, but it's any situation or experience that's sexual in nature that you feel traumatized by. And the reason I say it like that is that there's a bit of a blurred line, or there's a shame and blame thing around sexual acts, that there's a lot of grey area where, like, was it consensual, was it not, or all the complications that are involved in these things. So first of all, I just want to start with sexual trauma that might have been consensual at the time, or every situation is different. So it could be a sexual situation where you felt uncomfortable, or it might be a situation where you were trying to please your partner at the time and it was fully consensual and you thought that was the right thing to do because you've watched porn, he's watched porn, it's all meant to be like crazy rough sex and screaming orgasms. So just putting yourself in that situation consensually because at the time maybe you just didn't know any better. And I want to highlight as well that doesn't mean that it's your fault, by the way. In any situation there's some responsibility or things that we could have done differently, but that doesn't mean that you therefore have to blame yourself or hate yourself for doing a certain thing. It's just what happened at the time because of the knowledge that you and the person that you were interacting with sexually had at that time. And any way that you behaved at that time was completely appropriate because it was your level of understanding and there's just no way that it could have gone down any differently. So bringing that into the equation, and it might take years when it's been like that with a partner, and this was definitely my experience from one of my first relationships when I was really young, is it took a few years for me to look back and think, wow, that was actually really, really traumatizing, and I thought that I was doing what was right. I thought that I was serving the man, my boyfriend, and making him feel great and doing everything that he wanted. And I thought that was kind of my job as a woman, as this young, very young woman. And I spent a lot of time trying to sort of accept or blame him or blame myself. And what you eventually just come around to is that it just happened that way. And yes, it was traumatizing. And what's really beautiful, if you can find the silver lining, is that a lot of the time these kind of traumas will really draw our attention to a particular area, and help us grow and change and rise, maybe on a spiritual level, which was definitely the case for me. So some other areas might be as well, just getting into that more blurred line, is being too drunk to actually consent to the situation. And again, that might take a bit of time and reflection to look back and think, actually, that guy or that woman shouldn't have taken me to bed, or maybe you were both really drunk and it was just not pleasurable and quite painful, and both of you were too drunk to consent, and that's something that can happen as well. So yeah, lots of grey areas. And another one might be maybe consenting initially, wanting to have sex with that person, and then getting halfway through and wanting to stop for some reason, whether that's because they were doing something that was not enjoyable or just because some emotions came up within you and you actually just felt like you didn't really want to carry on, but feeling like you have to, feeling forced to stay in that situation, maybe just because of things like social pressure and not wanting to be like that girl who had to stop having sex. And especially these kind of things happen when we're teenagers or really young adults, because everyone talks about everyone's sex life and everyone's in everyone's business. So there's a lot of social pressure that comes into these situations, especially for girls, but for guys as well, like wanting to be like good at sex, not be like rejected from the tribe in a sense. So that can cause a lot of trauma in itself. So yeah, that's kind of I don't want to say lower and higher level because it's all trauma, but that's one end of the scale, I suppose. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got sexual assault. And this is a legal term, more so, I suppose, that covers when people are forced or coerced or even tricked into performing or engaging in some kind of sexual act where actually it was against their will, or it wasn't really what they wanted to do. It just, or definitely wasn't what they wanted to do as well. So that has quite a broad range, even if it's, well, I'm not saying even, but it could be something like being sent a dick pic that you didn't want to receive, and had to look at. You were forced to look at it because it came up on your phone. So again, there's a really broad spectrum, of what this could include, all the way to completely non-consensual penetration, which is obviously extremely traumatizing. But they all affect us on different levels and in different ways. And you can have, a series of lower level or other end of the scale trauma that like builds up, or maybe you have one big event that was extremely traumatizing. And none of these are less or more than each other. They all need to be healed. So it doesn't matter how extreme or not extreme the situation was. It's something that you need to bring your attention to and heal, which can sound incredibly overwhelming, but it's really helpful to have someone coaching you through that and supporting you, holding your hand, giving you ideas and practices and ways to bring that healing about on those different levels that I'm going to dive into over the next few weeks, of like the physical body, the mental, the mind, the emotions, and then the spiritual level as well. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing with my clients at the moment as a women's health coach, because this definitely affects all areas of our health, particularly gynecological health, but I'll go into that next week when I talk about the physical manifestations of sexual trauma. So just coming down to like the statistics as well, to make this clear, obviously this varies around the world depending on you are, but the statistic is that about 1 in 3 women have been sexually assaulted. So that goes back to our legal definition of like completely non-consensual, forced, coerced, or tricked. But when we broaden this out to sexual trauma, so that might have been, consensual sex with a partner that years later you're like, that wasn't really what my yoni wanted or needed to receive at the time. I actually haven't spoken to one woman that hasn't experienced some form of sexual trauma. Again, going back, even if it's just being sent a dick pic that you didn't want to receive, almost, or every woman I've spoken to on some level has been sexually traumatized. And I would be delighted, honestly, to meet a woman that hadn't been through this, but I just think it's so prevalent in our society and our culture, that sadly I've not come across one yet. And yeah, I'm still holding out, but so I guess the point I'm trying to make here is you're not alone. Pretty much every woman has experienced this on some level. So don't feel like you're this alien that's experienced this thing that you can't talk about or approach or bring awareness to how you feel about it or write about, or even reach out to someone like me or a therapist, like a hypnotherapist or a psychotherapist if you wanted to dive deeper into what happened. or, you know, what's still going on for you now and the emotions that are still coming up. So I'm going to, again, dive deeper into this over the next few weeks, but I just wanted to highlight a few symptoms, because maybe you're thinking like, oh, actually, maybe I am a little bit sexually traumatized, but you're a bit on the fence or you're not sure. So here's a few things that you may or may not experience that might highlight that there's some sexual trauma. And they also might highlight other things that are going on. These aren't all symptoms specifically of sexual trauma, so bear that in mind as well. So things like severe anxiety, and that can be in your day-to-day life, but particularly in sexual situations, feeling really anxious and stressed, that's a really key indicator. Having flashbacks of particular events, or similarly having nightmares that reoccur of particular events. Having memory loss, or like a disjointed memory because of the event, or, you know, around the event, because often what happens is it's too difficult for the mind to handle, so it kind of splits. So we might not remember exactly who was there, but we remember our emotions of the time, or vice versa. We might remember exactly what happened, but we might not be able to connect to any of our emotions around it because we've completely blocked it out. So that can manifest in all kinds of different ways. Disinterest in sex, generally speaking, eating disorders, addiction, pain or numbness during sex as well. And even one that I want to highlight, I suppose this has come up here and there, is actually fantasizing about the event and maybe like getting off or having an orgasm thinking about the event. And there's a lot of shame that comes around that, but it is such a common phenomena that happens. So I just want to highlight that that's a thing that happens, and it doesn't mean that you're crazy or that you enjoyed it or anything like that. It's just something that your mind's doing to try and bring your attention back to this thing that happened. And yeah, I can't dive into too much detail without, you know, context, and everyone's different, as I said, but just so that you know, that is a thing, and please don't feel ashamed if that's something that's been coming up for you when you're masturbating or even having sex with a partner and fantasizing about that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a really, really brief overview of what sexual trauma means. I'm trying to bring everything into the table there. And as I said, over the next few weeks, I'll be diving really deep into, first of all, next week, how physical trauma manifests in the body, and ways that we can start to heal this on a physical level. All right, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time, and please, please, please reach out to me if you need to have a chat about this or just a little bit of advice here and there. I'm always open for that. And if you would like to work with me ongoing as well, I would love to support you with this. But if not me, someone else. Just have someone helping you with this, because support, particularly from another woman, but men therapists as well, male therapists, can be really, really helpful with this. I had a male hypnotherapist, and it was really beautiful to, you know, kind of gain my trust in men around this area too. So yeah, males can help as well, for sure. Okay, that's enough for now. We'll dive into more next week. Thank you so much, and I'm sending you all my love.